Let me just say a few words about Sylvester and actually just introduce myself as well. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jane Secker and I work at the Centre for Learning Technology. So Sylvester is a senior researcher. He's based at the Serious Games Institute, which is somewhere that sounds actually like quite a lot of fun to work at. It's at Coventry University, and he's also been involved while he's at Coventry in setting up something called the Disruptive Media Learning Lab, which is going to be coming on stream in June. So very much looking forward to hopefully getting an invite to come and see that. Sylvester's got a PhD in engineering. He was based for 4 years at the University of Warwick, and his research interest is really all around the use of interactive and games technology in various domains. He's also a founder member of the Serious Games Society, and I think he's going to tell us as a little bit more about himself as we get going. But I'll hand over to him. We should also have plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So I'll hand over to Sylvester. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon to all of you. It is a pleasure for me to be here today, and thank you for inviting me to get involved and share my views on technologies and how we can actually use it in teaching and learning. The aim of my talk today is not really to evangelize that a game-based approach is the solution to enhancing and probably improving our teaching and learning, though it might sound a bit like it. But I think it is a good starting point for discussions on the potentials of using such an approach in probably helping us to redesign our teaching and learning, so on and so forth. My background, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm originally from Malaysia. I was a lecturer and a researcher in Malaysia for a few years, and then I needed a change, so I came to the UK and I was at Warwick University for a few years, working on simulation and all sorts of different sort of techie type of work with regards to the use in healthcare as well as in teaching and learning. And now I'm based at the Serious Games Institute. We conduct a lot of different research, trying to understand the science behind the use of games for not only teaching and learning, but for healthcare and for raising awareness on different issues, really. And we've published a lot of different papers that you can actually find on our website. I'm also involved, as Jen has mentioned before, that the Disruptive Media Learning Lab, where we are going to work on trying to basically use different technologies out there which are disrupting how we are doing things in real-life situations, in teaching and learning, in personal sort of healthcare, in all sorts of different things, and see how we can actually use it effectively and try to optimize our experience. As you can see, the key area that I'm going to work on this next few years would be the Disruptive Media Learning Lab, which would, in the way, work with the SGI, the Serious Games Institute, in trying to learn about the different technologies that we can actually use in learning, and games is a huge part of it. And we also have a spin-off company which is called the Serious Games International, one which is based in the UK, one in Singapore, and one in South Africa. So we're trying to cover all bases, and one is going to be set up in Washington, I think. So we sort of recognize that the advancement in technology has, in a way, influenced the evolution of our needs and our requirements in all sorts of different domains in teaching and learning as well. And I believe that these technologies are disrupting the traditional way of doing things. And some might look at it as, you know, something which is not really good for, say, for example, higher education. But I believe that if we can basically learn about the different benefits that we can actually take from technologies such as games, we might be able to redesign our pedagogy, redesign the way we look at things, redesign the way we support our students. Because I believe that they will have access to a lot of different technologies out there, and we have to change how we do things at university to support that. Games in itself has got a lot of different potentials that would be quite interesting to look at. Someone can spend like hours and hours playing games, and this opens up big opportunities for us to actually learn about the characteristics of games and how can we engage learners, because engagement is an issue, and how to sustain engagement in learning is quite challenging in a way. So how can we use existing technologies and see how can we enhance or optimize learning experience by using such technology in our teaching and learning. In the UK itself, probably half of the population, they would call themselves gamers in any different sort of ways. Social gamers, it's like keen gamers who are on console games like 24/7, and there are people like us, like I myself. I wouldn't call myself like a keen gamer because I don't like games at all, and I have no idea why I'm doing serious games. But I think in the way that I think it is quite good for someone like myself who are not really keen in games, in trying to see if such technology can actually change my life, change how I look at things, change how I perceive my own sort of health regulation type thing. And in terms of learning as well, I can see that a lot of students at Coventry universities, they would spend hours and hours on playing with their, casual games on their iPhones and all sorts of different devices they've got. And we're trying to see how can we tap into our natural desire to be entertained and our natural desire to compete. So if we can actually tap into this sort of potentials, I believe that we would be able to improve how we do things in real life situations. And in terms of platforms, in the UK itself, there are 3.9 game platforms per gamer. You might use probably mobile games, PC games, or console, perhaps. I have no idea where point 9 is. But anyway, so this shows that we've got a lot of different platforms out there that we can learn from. And I believe that, like, for example, social platforms, tweets, you've got Facebook, Google+, and all sorts of different platforms that can be used for sort of in a game type of situation, or in a different word, you can use gamification, which I'm going to talk about in the next few slides. And mobile learning is one of the key sort of area that we are going to look at in this next few months, because I believe that this is where the future of learning is. In terms of being mobile and being in, you can actually learn outside of the classroom setting, which would enhance our sort of contextual understanding of the subject that we are learning, and would sort of improve our understanding of our surroundings as well. So these are the different platforms. There are so many different platforms out there that would help us to achieve a lot of different things. So why games? We need to engage and sustain engagement. Sustaining is the most difficult thing. Engaging perhaps would be much easier because technologies can be a fad. So everyone would want to get on, the new technologies, new devices, new environments, new games sort of thing. But how can we sustain the engagement? How can we make sure that whatever they are engaging with would give them a lot of benefits? How do we optimize the experience, the learning experience in this case? The demography and the needs are changing. We are in a society where we are very demanding in terms of what we want, what we need, what we think is perfect for us type thing. How can we balance this? Because we can't actually meet everyone's needs, but how can we balance the need to be engaged with something which is exciting and the need to actually gain something which is more positive from it? And pedagogy is evolving with these 21st century skills and all sorts of different initiatives out there, like flipped classrooms and all sorts of different methods which have been introduced in higher education. How can we support this? And of course, scientific evidence will be very much important in justifying why we need to use a certain technology in our intervention strategy. What are we trying to improve? What are we trying to solve? Are we going to look at it in a different sort of way, whether we are going to provide a solution to an existing problem, or are we going to introduce something else on top of what we're doing, regardless of whether we are facing any challenges or not? So probably, I think both would be quite valid depending on the scenarios and depending on the situation where we are in. For example, in the New Center at Coventry University, we are interested in looking at different technologies and impose on the existing system and see whether it's going to work or not. Because if we don't actually start somewhere, we would not know. For example, what happened with iPhones and Kodak and the photographies of cameras of business. You can see what happened when they don't actually try and jump onto the same bandwagon in using digital cameras and things like that. So I think in learning we have to do the same thing. But someone was telling me before, saying that if we are in healthcare, for example, say that if we compare healthcare in probably 30, 40 years ago, and if we're still using the same technology that we're using now, everyone will be making a big fuss about it. But why are we still doing the same thing in teaching and learning, like the same as probably 30, 40 years ago type thing, especially in schools? Can we not evolve? Can we not change our ways of doing things? We don't have to start from scratch. There are a lot of different technologies out there. Convergences of technology is very important. There are so many different solutions trying to do the same thing. How can we converge these different technologies and provide a more connected experience? And communities, terror communities, game-based learning communities, all sorts of different communities out there. They are trying to promote the use of different technologies in teaching and learning. How can we get involved? How can we make sure that we would share the same interests and share the same technologies? I just want to show a short video. This is quite outdated actually, because we haven't got a new video for this, because we've got a few more games which have not been included on this, but you can have a look at it's going to run. Go. The videos are not running. Right, what I can do, I can play the video at the end, I think. Well, there are a few games that we have created at the Students' Game Institute, and not only do we create games, but we help companies and governmental bodies to evaluate the games. One of the games which are quite famous, I think it's called, it is for triage training, which was created by a company which is called Blitz, which unfortunately is not there anymore. But the game itself has been used in a lot of different areas in trying to learn about the techniques in triage training and how do you actually use games for that. And a few other games which are funded by EU-funded projects. For example, a game that is trying to raise awareness on fire evacuation, try to see the connection with Moodle and LMSs type thing. And it has been rolled out in the schools in Europe. About 12 schools are taking it on, and we are in the middle of personalizing the game to suit the different schools in Europe. And there are a few other games as well, which I can actually give you a link to at the end of my presentation, and I have no idea why the video doesn't work. I should have tried it. Anyway, and the evidence, as I said before, is very important in trying to see how we can actually justify the need to use different technologies, for example, games, because there are a lot of negative sort of press about using games out there. So how can we convince parents, how can we convince teachers and lecturers to actually use games in all sorts of different forms so that we can actually improve how we do things and perhaps enhance what we are currently doing now. And one of the game which is quite recent is this game which is called Prepare. It is actually a game that is created to assist teachers to deliver relationship and sex education. It's not about contraceptions, safe sex and things like that. It's all about relationships. Because when we have sort of like 6-month focus group with teachers, psychologists, and the students themselves, they were all saying that we don't actually know how to handle relationships, whether it will be a positive relationship or negative relationships, especially in terms of coercion, sexual coercion, relationship pressure, because this would lead to something which is more detrimental. It's like self-esteem, probably unsafe sex and things like that. So what this game is trying to achieve is to enhance communal discourse within a classroom setting. So based on the studies that we have done for the past 1 year, the results has been fantastic, and it is being rolled out in the schools in Coventry and Warwickshire. And the thing about this game, since it is a game which is created by a university, we haven't got a lot of funding for it. And as you can see, it is quite a simple game, but it does what it says on tin, and it achieves what the schools and the councils are trying to achieve. So what I'm trying to say here is the quality and the fidelity of the game that you want to create would depend on the deployment of the context where you want to deploy the game itself. This would not work, I believe, would not work in isolation because it is not engaging enough. But within a classroom setting, it's so different. Normally the teacher would stand there and then talk about relationships, and most of the students would just cringe. So by having this sort of intervention, regardless of whether it's going to be a game-based intervention or it's going to be something else, as long as it is engaging within that particular group of students, they will be able to open up and talk about a lot of different issues, which the teachers themselves say that they are opening up, it's like a can of worms. So they were talking about their experiences and they didn't actually know what to do with it. Because it is within a classroom setting, it's supposed to be what happens in the classroom stays there. So, but there are a lot of stories that they managed to get from the students, and this is quite an exciting area where the schools are trying to use games to engage students within a classroom setting. I'm not sure if it's going to work. Yep. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Thank you. I saw a recent documentary on BBC.
Yeah.
So it was about Japanese guys who had virtual girlfriends, and this girlfriend existed on the phone.
Right.
So it's can it become that real? I mean, I don't have a question, but I'm just looking at precedents. What else happens in the world? So they basically form relationships with their mobile phones, and they feel that they don't need any real life relationships.
Right. This is like within the area of virtual characters. How real do you want a virtual character is? We have the same ethics as robotics. How real do you want a robot to be? Do you want to still have, how do you call it, the difference between real and virtual, or real and robotic type thing? So these are one of the key issues that everyone is talking about now, especially about virtual characters. And some people can't actually see the difference between their experience in the virtual world and experience in the real world. And there are two ways to look at it. One, there's a huge research group that's trying to reduce the gap between virtual and real experience. There's a huge group that's trying to talk about the ethics of we should not allow that to happen. So which camp should we be in? It depends on the ethics of the software or the games or any apps that we've got out there, but it all depends on the outcome. As you said, that might be psychologically sort of disturbing to see someone who would sort of produce a relationship with a device rather than another person. And I think that is another issue that can be talked about. But I believe in the future of games is in the pervasiveness of games that will allow you to not only interact with a virtual environment, but to interact with your surroundings and people around you as well, especially with these social games that are going on. But I haven't got an answer for that, but I think this is an ethical issue that is very real. Yeah, yeah. So, not sure this one would work, but, oh, this one is. Anyway.
Hello and welcome to the game show Prepare. And please give a hand in welcoming your host for the show.
It's volume.
Hi, my name's Bruce.
And I'm Gwen, and we'll be your host for this game.
In this game, you will get to see possible scenarios of sexual coercion. It is up to you to choose from the different options and see what happens next. Experiencing pressure in relationships is very common and can happen to girls and boys. It's important to recognise when this is happening.
The aim of the game is to pick scenarios and decide whether you think there are situations where coercion or pressure is happening. There is a time limit, so stay focused.
For our question and answer round, we will show you 6 different scenarios.
So these scenarios are from the psychologists as well as the teachers were
Pete
teaching the
sent
course.
a text message last night that Anita felt uncomfortable with. Pete messaged asking, "What colour knickers are you wearing?" Anita replied, but Pete then just messaged, "Prove it, send a picture." Is this an example of coercion? And now we continue to the second part of our game.
Now you get to play yourself in 2 different scenarios. First, see one version of events play out, then time rewinds and you get to change any outcomes you didn't like by making different choices at certain moments.
Go on, you know you fancy her. But this is the one time you get to be alone, without parents and stuff. Hey, how are you feeling?
Yeah, good thanks. How are you?
Wait up a minute, let's stay here for a bit.
Maybe, but shouldn't we get back?
Nah, come on, I want to be alone with you.
I like you, but I don't really want to do this now.
If you want to spend time together, how can you make that happen without anyone feeling pressured or upset about it? Let's have a look at that scene again.
I think we should go back. I'm just not ready yet.
So as you can see, we've got what the teachers were saying, that they want to have scenarios and they can stop the game at any time they want. So the game mechanics basically made what the teachers were, what they're required with is that we've got the pause button so they can talk about it, they can talk about the situation, how do we handle this, what should we do? And the fact that most people ask, why is the scenario that I've just shown? And the answer is maybe, because there's a thin line between, you know, being coercive and not being coercive. So the teachers can actually just pause it and they can talk about it. It's like, what happened if this, you know.
Okay, that's fine. I don't want you to feel pressured. Let's head back.
I think you wanted to go further last night, but I wasn't ready. It was really nice of you to actually listen to me. It was respectful, and I don't think a lot of people do that nowadays.
We hope you've learnt about coercion and how to avoid being pressured or pressuring other people.
Thanks for playing. You've been great.
And the voices are from, we've got kids from the charity which is called Voice for Care. So these are the kids, the children who are from a very difficult background. So we involve them in the whole thing, so they will provide the voices and everything, just to get everyone involved really. Right, serious games in education, it's like, do we need it? Maybe not. But can we experiment? Well, I'm a researcher, so I said yes. and see whether we can improve something which is already working, or probably we can use it to change how we do things, because there are a lot of different challenges that we are facing in terms of engagement, for example. So the need for intervention is very important. And the way we do it is very much similar to how we do it in health sort of studies, where we would map intervention. And how can we map the requirements? How can we make sure that what we are trying to solve and what we are trying to create would actually benefit the stakeholders? So the context is very important, and we need to participate the stakeholders. So that's what we've been doing, working with students themselves, lecturers, teachers, and all sorts of different stakeholders out there, who are the ones who are going to use this particular solution, if you can call it a solution. Measures and evidence. When we design games, we need to make sure that the measures and the evidence is a part of the design stage itself, so that we would know what learning outcomes that we want to support, and what type of learning process that we want to encourage within that particular game. Because it is fine to say that after using a game, you would improve your knowledge in A, B, C, and D, but which part of the game is effective? Which part of the game would teach you about probably problem solving? Which part of the game would teach you about different things? So what we are interested in the mapping of learning mechanics and game mechanics, and see where they merge, and how can we create probably a toolkit that can help someone who is not a game designer or a game developer to create a game for their own use. So what is a good design? It's quite vague, I think, when we talk about good design. It all depends on the context of the game itself. Where are we going to deploy it, and what sort of outcomes are we expecting from it? And return on investment. Since when we talk about games, we have to think about the users, we have to think about probably the SME or the company is going to create the game sort of thing. So they both have different needs. What type of returns on the investment are they looking at? In terms of, say, higher education, we want to improve learning experience. We want to improve teaching and learning, and that will be reflected by the types of students that we are going to produce at the end of the course. In terms of the companies itself, they would think about, are we going to sell this? Are we going to get more money from it, type thing? So this sort of issues influence our decisions in using games in education, for example. Informal learning is easier to deploy, but formal learning, it can be quite difficult, especially that you need to convince the policymakers, you need to convince the university, you need to convince the faculty, you need to convince your dean, and all sorts of different issues that we need to think about. But I'm more interested in how can we design a good serious games. The balance of fun and serious, of course. And this is like an oxymoron in a way. It's how can games be fun and serious at the same time? You can be a serious gamer, but can you gain some serious sort of benefits from it that will enhance your life, enhance your learning, enhance your health, enhance a lot of different parts of your day-to-day life? So the balance is very important, and it has to be measurable so that we would know that this serious game is actually a good game. The engagement with stakeholders, their views on the games itself, not only in terms of the aesthetics, not only in terms of the engagement, the mechanics, but the outcomes. Are their life going to be changed? Are their behaviors going to be changed? Are their attitudes towards certain issues will be changed? Or their knowledge or cognition, and so on and so forth. So I believe that it has to be scientifically validated in terms of not only the game itself, but the design and the theories that go into the development of that particular game. So it is very important. And in order for us to understand whether a learning process is promoted within the game, we would need to really collect a lot of information on the learners themselves. So this would pose ethical issues. So we need to really understand that the ethics of it is very important. So this is, I think, why deploying serious games as a tool in formal education can be quite tricky, because there are a lot of different things that we need to consider. So the theory, the content, the game design, we have to find a way to balance this out and making sure that we have the right scientific theories to support what we're trying to do. Flow theory, mastery, and all sorts of different learning pedagogies. It can get a bit confusing for someone like me. It's like my background is not pedagogy. And to work with someone who is doing research in pedagogy, it's like we don't speak the same language sometimes. So we need to find a way to really work together and speak the same language, so that everyone would understand what everyone is trying to achieve. And this is one of the things that we are still doing now. As I've mentioned before, we are trying to map learning mechanics to game mechanics. Learning mechanics is like the doing of learning, so the process of learning, the pedagogies and the methods that you can use, a lot of different techniques that everyone has proven to be effective type thing. And how can we support this by using games? What types of mechanics, what type of genre of games perhaps, or scenario-based games, question and answers, role-playing, and all sorts of different mechanics that we can actually use. And try and match, these two and see how we can actually do it. And what we have done so far is to look at existing games with proven effectiveness in terms of transferring of skills and learning, trying to see what sort of mechanics have they used, and try to do more experiments in trying to understand the different mechanics in that particular game and group them, so on and so forth. But it's not done yet, but this is towards creating a toolkit that would help designers, developers, and learning technologists perhaps, to actually use this particular method and see how this can inform their design of a learning tool. And we're also interested in the different types of players. The different types of players can be mapped with the different types of learners as well. And I know that learning styles has been debunked, I think last year or the year before. But I still believe that there is something to the way people learn and their needs, and how can we support this. And in terms of players, there are 4 different types of players that we are looking at. We're talking about the achievers, the explorers, socialites, and killers. So there might be like convergences of a lot of different types, but these are the 4 key types that game designers and game developers are looking at, especially in terms of gamification. So there are a lot of different games out there. It's like they would normally fall under achievers, where they would talk about badges, leaderboards, scores. This would not interest a player who is mostly socialites, for example. They are more interested in doing Farmville. They are not interested in getting a lot of points, but are interested in the community type thing, for example. So sometimes we need to understand the different types of learners, as well as what types of players are there. So there is I think like a huge community in trying to map that as well. It's quite interesting to see how we can match player types and learners. And the different sort of aim in using games, which can be linked to learning as well. For example, here, are we talking about trying to create a habit to change someone's behavior so that they would actually do something and self-regulate themselves in terms of health, in terms of teaching and learning? Or are you trying to support someone who wants to master something? It's like playing golf, for example. You would do it over and over and over and over again until you master it. So there are a lot of different characteristics that need to be considered when we develop games. But if you look at it, it all depends on the type of users. What are you interested in? Because working with humans is quite challenging. Everyone knows that trying to understand a human being is quite difficult but interesting at the same time. In terms of flow, I'm sure that some of you might know what flow concept is. It's about getting a balance in engaging and difficulty of that particular task that you're trying to create, that thing. So it's the same thing with gaming. So we're trying to find a balance that would, that would sustain your engagement. So between the difficulty of the particular game itself, the different levels, and the time spent on playing, whether you want to be engaged with a particular game or not. And sometimes a game can be too difficult and you just give up. Okay, I'm not going to play this anymore. That's why most people would play Angry Birds, because it's such an easy game, easy to understand. And the fact that I mentioned to Jen before, saying that there's a school in the US, they are using Angry Birds to teach physics, and it's working, so why not? So that's why I say we don't have to start from scratch, reuse and repurpose. Right, serious games are basically video games or computer-based games that is used to address and support serious aims other than trying to entertain sort of a player. But gamification is a word which is coined to basically describe an approach where we use game mechanics to engage someone in existing sort of process or activities. For example, like now, say that if I want to engage you in a gamification sort of scenario, I would say in the beginning saying that the objective of today is for you to remember what I say throughout the whole talk, and anyone who can name 3 different objects, for example, would win a prize. So you would pay attention. If I show an object, you would remember the 3 types of objects that I've got. So this is gamification, because you have an objective and you have a mechanic there where I'm going to show you different things, and you would spot different objects, and then you would use your own cognitive sort of power to remember what those objects are. And you have a gaming type of process there. So it's the same sort of thing which is being used by marketing in the commercial world. They are trying to encourage the use of their websites, so they will introduce gamifications of mechanics on their particular websites. For example, the longer you spend time on that particular website, or the more pages you go to in that particular website, you'll be up there on the leaderboard, or you'll be given badges. For example, you are an expert now because you've been on this website forever, type thing. So it has been used in marketing a lot. But I believe that using gamification for learning should go beyond badges and leaderboards. It has to be more effective. This is an example of gamification. How can you encourage someone to walk up and down the stairs? Instead of having a normal staircase, why don't we have a musical staircase? So I think this research has been done. I'm not sure whether it's in Belgium or somewhere. I don't quite remember where. But it's working. People would use the staircase more than the escalator. Nike is using gamification to try and encourage you to run, to compete with yourself, with your own goals. You would discover your own goals. You would compete with strangers as well who are on the same system. So I believe that, as part of, I call disruptive technology, game-based approach can provide different solutions in different scenarios and different contexts that would help us to actually change how we do things and to excite ourselves in self-regulation, for example, or helping us to understand what our needs are and what our goals are in life, and especially in learning. How can we support blended learning? I'm sure the LSC is doing it now anyway with the online learning and all sorts of different techniques that you have used. How can we engage, the community in blended learning, for example? Because you can provide a solution, but if no one is engaging with it and you can sustain the engagement, what's the point? You've got an online system, no one's going to use it, type thing. So if you use gamification sort of techniques, or game-based techniques, to encourage people to come back and use your system, to use your solutions, I think that would be quite useful. Flipped classroom. Even though some people might call this the future of learning, but I think it's not really, because it has been introduced probably a few years ago, by 2 teachers in the US who managed to do it, and they publicized it, and they became famous because of this. And everyone is basically trying to use it now, and Coventry University is going to flip all the different lectures that we have at the university this year. And it's going to be quite difficult. We would definitely receive a lot of friction from a lot of different lecturers, but we just plow through. But I think we need to try and see how we can innovate how we do things. And the only way to do it is to start doing it and try it out. Bring your own devices. This is one of the key themes for the next few years. Big companies are doing it, and schools are doing it, and universities are doing this now so that you can reduce the cost in providing devices for your students, for example. And how can we encourage or monitor the use of different technologies, different platforms, different devices, and ensuring that learning outcomes are still supported. So there are a lot of different issues that needs to be talked about. And pervasive learning, there's nothing new about this, but the technologies are getting good. Google, glasses, mobile phones, augmented reality, all sorts of different things that can be used to encourage, to learn about different things outside of the classroom settings. So games can provide such a platform for such innovation. So we need to think about the future classroom. What do we need? There's so many different solutions out there, different technologies. How can we create a more connected experience? A lot of people are talking about cloud computing. One of the key things that everyone is going into. Learning analytics. Game analytics has been used by digital games. They would learn about your behavior while playing Farmville, and they would change the scenarios and everything to suit the majority of the customers. So why can't we do the same thing for learning? Game analytics for learning. This is one of the things that we are working on as well, and we've got a lot of publications in the area that you can have a look at. Game-based learning is a part of it. Mobile learning is one of the key things that I think we should get into. Desktops of online learning is not really working anymore, I think, because in the next few years, everyone would be tapping into different devices. So I think we need to find a way to support this and provide a good transition. Open content, MOOCs, and a lot of different platforms out there. How can we ensure that it will be cost effective? Because it's quite expensive to provide a free game for every single university out there. No one's going to do it. But how do we do it? Can we reuse existing games and repurpose for our own needs? Personalized learning environments in line with Web 3.0. It's all about personalization. It's all about me, and me. So I think we can't actually beat it, so we just need to join it, really. So try to support the different people with different needs, but there have to be a balance as well. So my last slide. I'm aware of the times. In all this chaos, how can we create a seamless experience? Seamless, connected experience. It's so difficult to monitor. For example, I'll be using my handphone, I'll be going to lectures, I'll be doing this, I'll be interacting with the companies in my internship, for example. How can we provide a seamless experience among all these different techniques in teaching and learning? Can we use technology? Can we use games? Or can we use gamification as an ecosystem that would include game analytics or learning analytics that will analyze each and every one of you? It's like Big Brother. And the last question I would pose is, what is the ethics? As I said, what is the ethics in all of this? Can we just do it without thinking that, privacy, I would know everything about you. It's like, this is what you do, this is what you eat, this is what would entice you, this is what would excite you, sort of thing. So this is a learning program for you. Is it ethical? So it's a question. There's no answer. There's no right or wrong answer to this. But I'm sure that in the next few years, hopefully they will get to work together with LSC as well in the new disruptive media learning lab that we are going to launch soon. So I'm sure they will find a solution to this. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Sylvester.
Yeah.
We've actually got around half an hour or so for questions. I know some people might need to go at 4 o'clock, but we've got plenty of time for discussion. You've certainly given us lots to think about. I was quite fascinated when we were talking over lunch about using a game like, you know, Angry Birds to teach physics and things like that. I think what I'm quite interested in is whether games are also a distraction as well. I certainly know many people seem to be completely addicted to Candy Crush at the moment and spending hours of their time.
Absolutely.
Is there obviously some drawbacks with using games in education?
Well, what I can say is we are in the world that we are all distracted. All sorts of different technologies, not only games. There are a lot of different technologies out there that are distracting our sort of like, how do you call it, our goal in learning, for example. Someone can actually just play on their Facebook the whole day, you know, updating their statuses and reading everyone else's life, that thing. As an answer to your question, I think there should be a balance. But I believe that the fact that a game can actually sustain engagement, sustain participation in such an activity, I think there is a very good potential there for us to tap into this particular, you know, particular addiction in gaming. I think most people have got a certain, to a certain degree, an addictive personality. But there is a different issues. But I think once you understand the learners, once we understand the person who is going to enter university, you will understand how they will interact with technologies. Have they got a certain level of addictiveness in their personality, for example? This would help us to model sort of like a personalized learning environment for individuals, regardless of whether they are going to be interested in using games or not. But there are a lot of different technologies out there, and games is just a part of it. But I believe what we can learn from games would be the mechanics of games. It's about challenges. It's about the level of difficulties. It's about the level of difficulties. It's about a lot of different mechanics that you can use in learning. But it's quite difficult to say that when someone is quite addicted to playing games, especially in the enclosure of their bedroom, I think it's something to be worried about. But I'm sure when we talk about mobile gaming, pervasive learning, this is where we can take them out from their bedrooms into the world.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Can I open the floor for questions? And if you could use the mic, which is not going to project your voice, but it's for people listening to the stream. So if you could just wait for the mic if you'd like to ask a question. Anyone?
Hi, thanks. Thanks for your presentation. Yeah. I'm interested in this idea of transferability that you talked on. So, you can have learning outcomes within the game context. But that doesn't ensure that you would transfer it into a real world situation. And so I guess I had a two-part question, which is with gaming e-learning as opposed to other types of e-learning, do you see a difference in transferability of learning and skills, and what can be done to increase in terms of design to help increase that transfer?
Yep. As I've mentioned before, it's one of the key issues in terms of using a virtual world to teach is the gap between virtual experience and real experience. Are you able to transfer the knowledge that you would get from a virtual environment, for example? But I think games provide the ability to create scenarios or different role plays that will allow you to use different skills, transversal skills and competences, for example, solving problems. They can be transferable within a game sort of scenarios. Something which is quite physical as well, because you have a lot of different games, for example, using Wii platforms and Kinect type thing, that you can transfer certain movements. These are the things which are quite easy to transfer, but in terms of sort of dry basic knowledge in terms, for example, say maths. For example, you learn about maths, but you need to provide a scenario that will reflect how this particular theory is in mathematics to be used in the real context. So I think the scenarios of the particular game is very important. But there are a lot of studies which are being done, and what we need to do with games itself, which have not really been done by most of the research institutes all over the world, is the long-term studies on the effectiveness of any solutions, including games. So I think the long-term studies is important, but we are doing that now. And something that we call dosing or dosage studies, which is quite common in healthcare. So you give a dosage of a solution, game-based solution, and then you would test them whether they were able to improve their knowledge, improve the skills in different things, in real-life situation. Then we would know how much dosage should we give to a student. Because sometimes you don't actually know how long should the game be. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully that will answer your... Yeah. Is that Twitter?
Hi, a couple of questions from Twitter. First question from Emma. What platforms are you using, and can you speak about the technology needed to access different platforms for the games that you produce at the Serious Games Institute? And the other question is, can you clarify how you differentiate serious games in gamification?
Okay. Okay, the first question, we are using Unity 3D. You can actually start from scratch using C++ and OpenGL and all sorts of different things. But if you want to create a prototype that you can show immediately, you can use Unity 3D. It's a platform that would require a bit of scripting, where you can create game environments and game scenarios, and you can actually deploy it on different platforms. You can deploy it on a desktop platform, you can deploy it on a web platform, you can deploy it on Android, iOS. So you can deploy it on any platforms by using this particular game engine. And the fact that now you can actually buy, or I think the plugin will come in as part of it, I think, which is the game analytics part of it, that will allow you to understand, what you do within a game process type thing. There are a lot of different platforms out there that can be used, but I think Unity 3D is the one that we are using at the moment. And the second question is serious games gamification. A lot of confusion going around between gamification and serious games. Gamification hasn't got sort of like how do you call it, a fixed definition of what it is. Some people would say that serious game is a part of gamification, but I think that they are quite different. Serious games is about computer games or video games, which are basically used to address serious issues, and you can create different genre of games that will address these particular issues with serious outcomes. Gamification is about using the concept that game technology is using. For example, how do you engage a player? What sort of mechanics do you need to use? And then you basically apply these particular techniques, or apply this particular concept and paradigms in a real life situation. For example, in a classroom setting, you can create goals. You can create sort of the processes that will allow you to evaluate whether the learning goals you have set at the beginning of the class is achieved. That is in a basic form. But in terms of, say, for example, Nike has created a platform that is basically trying to encourage you to run more, to exercise really. So it comes with an app, it comes with an ecosystem of yourself, the app itself that will be able to monitor how much miles you have run and your targets sort of thing, and you can compete with the others as well. So that is gamification. It's not a game. It's not a game per se. But serious game, it is a normal game, video games, mobile games with discrete game sort of structure. No, it's still a bit confusing, but email me.
So even in the conventional games, I mean, you have lots of games, and then you have chess. So in these types of virtual games as well, is there something that corresponds to chess? You know, something that has lots of combinations in it. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. So it's not really a script, but it's more open-ended. Is there something like that being developed?
Yes and no. There are a lot of different games which have been created with that sort of random, sort of neural network type of perspective to how the game mechanics is played. It has no clear objectives of how it's going to be. For example, if you want to play SimCity 4, for example, the goal of it is to just to sort of gain a lot of money or profit from our revenues or so on and so forth. But it is quite random. How you do it, it doesn't really tell you how to do it. You just need to really understand the game itself and you evolve as you go along. But it's not as complicated or sophisticated as the one that you mentioned. I think, for example, chess is more about, you know, strategy, teaching you about strategy. So I think it's quite similar to some other games which are role-play games that would give different outcomes. You can decide on different things, but this is quite fixed as well. You might have probably 5 or 6 different options that would branch out into a few more other options. So it's more like a tree type of game rather than something which is quite random, for example, chess. But chess is quite fixed in a way that you can only move certain ways, but there are a lot of different strategies involved. But this is one thing that we are very much interested in, especially within the EU context, in encouraging or fostering transversal skills and competences, soft skills. How do we use games to do that? So it's all about the scenarios, all about the role-play games that you can create, or probably it's all about the strategy games perhaps. So it all depends on how and when you are going to deploy it. Any more questions?
Okay, well, oh, we have got one more question. Yeah, no, we've got plenty of time. So.
I'm here all day.
Given that the preparation and organization and sorting out of games is obviously quite long, I suppose it takes anything from half a year to a year or something to create a game.
Yep.
What is your experience in terms of lifespan? How long do these games then last, for people to use? That will be a question that a lot of universities will ask, and they say, well, okay, if you're going to use it for one term, it's not worth our investment. But if it's going to last for 3 years, okay, we might even look at it. But because the threshold is so high in getting the technology right, the script, all of the the voiceovers and everything, it's very involved. It's not going to be something that you do as a lecturer by yourself. So
well, what I can say is like the consumption of content has been one of the key things in terms of games, because this is how they are making money. So they will provide new versions of the games all the time. But now there is a huge movement in basically using the creation of games as a learning process. And there are a lot of different universities are actually focusing on the platforms, creating platforms for games rather than the game content itself. Because the game content can be repurposed, can be changed, can be sort of personalized to meet the needs of the different subjects and courses perhaps. So what we are interested in now is to create a platform, an authoring platform that will allow someone who is not a designer or a game developer to create their own games for their own schools. And that's one of the EU projects which is called Magical, I think. They have created a game which is called Megos that will allow someone who is not really a developer to create game scenarios. And there are a lot of different other, I can't actually remember all of them, but there is a movement in trying to create an authoring tool for teachers as well as lecturers to actually create their own games. And one of the things that I've mentioned before was the mapping of learning mechanics, trying to map it with game mechanics. This is towards creating a more usable tool that would inform someone like yourself, say that, okay, this is what I need, I think role-play games would be suitable for my classroom, and this is the topics of the content I want to put in. So you will be able to perhaps drag and drop type thing. So this is one of the things that is in the future. There are a lot of different tools out there that you can use. Social tools that will allow you to create social games. But most of them are not really usable because some of them are very much concentrating on question and answers type of games, which is not really engaging if you think about it. But the platform is there. It can only be improved. So I'm sure like in the next few years, it would be more cost effective for higher education to invest in a platform for game authoring rather than the game itself. So someone like the CRT can actually take on and would be able to provide trainings for the different lecturers who are interested in using it so they can create their own games. And some of the games now are basically attached to Moodle, LMSs, a lot of different things that will allow you to provide a better transition from the, the system that you're using now to a new way of doing things. So potentials are there, but there is no one solution for it. Yeah.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, if you could just join me once again in thanking Sylvester for a really enlightening talk about games and learning. Thank you.
Yeah.